Broadcasting from Youngstown, Ohio, this is the MVRed podcast, the show where we talk about news and politics impacting the Mahoning Valley, the state of Ohio, and the USA. If you want to subscribe to our podcast, find us on your favorite podcast streaming app or visit our website, www.mvred.com. If you want to share your opinion with us, please email info@mvred.com, as we would love to hear from you. Now, let's get things started. Here are your hosts, Michael Metzinger and Dane Davis.
Welcome, everyone. Sorry for the technical delays. Nothing could ever go right with our show. But nonetheless, welcome to episode 38 of the MVRed podcast. This is our Mixon show. We're hoping to be more accurate than we were in 2020 when I was just a little bit off, but Dane was actually pretty damn accurate. So we're going to give our predictions for the 2022 midterms this evening as Dane drops off. But again, want to apologize for everybody for the technical issues. So tonight we want to hit home on especially the battle for the U.S. Senate. There's a lot of open seats out there that can go either way. It's coming down to the finish. Could mean the difference between a 50-50 split or maybe as many as 53 or 54 U.S. Senate seats for the Republicans as Dane joins us. Dane,
Hello.
Welcome.
Hello.
I was just sharing with everybody our technical issues we were having that.
Hello, Michael. Can you hear me?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Is everything okay?
We are good. We are good. It just nobody's here for our technical abilities. They're here for our political analysis. So, like I was saying,
man, if our political analysis is as good as our tech abilities, we're like the Nate Bronze, right? We're bad, man.
Yeah.
Oh boy, yikes, Yike-O-Rama. I feel like 12-year-olds know how to like stream and it can have like massive Twitch counts and can stream nonstop. And here's us, a bunch of boomers, and we can't even get a video to work.
Yeah. I mean, I struggle at work on Microsoft Teams meetings half the time. I plug my headset in, I start talking, nobody hears me. So yeah. I thought I was good with technology. Apparently not. Anyways, it's been a few months since we had our last podcast. So
Months?
I think it's been a couple months. Probably since mid to late summer. But a lot has happened. I think since the whole abortion issue kind of went by the wayside. It's the focus has been in the stretch run here.
Yeah.
Inflation and the economy and where we are moving in the 2023 and 2024. Quite frankly, if you look at a lot of the polling data out there, a lot of people are saying the United States is on the wrong track right now.
Yeah.
And historically speaking, in the midterms, the incumbent party typically fares poorly. But then when you compound with inflation as high as it is, the economy, I know there was a little bit of GDP growth this particular quarter, so I guess technically we're back out of the whole recession thing, but I think you probably would know better than me, Dane, but you hear these surveys of business executives predicting that 2023 is going to be a tough year, and I tend to agree with them.
Year. Yeah.
Yeah, I know you've been on the Ron Verb show on 570 WKBN talking about that quite a bit. So I think the two big issues that are kind of go hand in hand into this election are inflation and the economy. And quite frankly, the Democrats don't really have a great answer. So it's up to the Republican candidates to try to pounce on that frustration with the Biden administration. Things just haven't gone their way, especially ever since the Afghanistan withdrawal. It just seems like once that happened, just things went south and they have not recovered. And so it should set up for an interesting midterm next Tuesday night.
Well, what do the Democrats really stand for besides blaming white people for all the problems in the U.S.? I guess they also stand for giving mastectomies to preteens and calling it healthcare. But beyond those two policies, I really don't know what they stand for anymore, right? I mean, if you can't, whatever the problem is, well, it's because white people are racist. And if it's not that, it's because we're not giving teenagers and preteens double mastectomies and genital surgery and puberty blockers. What else do they have to offer? I mean, I'm not just even, I'm trying to be charitable to them. Um, does anybody remember, this is the one thing that's not talked about. Everybody's talking about inflation. The vax mandate. Remember when we were going to fire people from their jobs if they refuse to take a vaccine that doesn't prevent people from getting COVID? So it's unlike any other vaccine. Did anybody remember that? We weren't going to let them into polite society. We were going to ban them from public places. In our newspapers, we wanted them to die or to be at the very last for healthcare. And then, it's interesting that the people that developed those vaccines, they never tested them to see if it stopped transmission. And in fact, they didn't, right? We saw COVID rates skyrocket. And they went from, if you take this vaccine, 95% chance you won't get COVID, to, well, you're not going to die from COVID, to, well, you're going to get maybe slightly sick, to just shut up and take it. And then, by the way, you need like 18 boosters. So, and does anyone else remember, on top of that issue, we sent kids home for the spring of 2020. And then when we knew that they were protected, some schools kept kids home, some schools kept kids out of the schools all the way up until 2021. And in fact, even as recently as this year, they were masking kids in like daycare and preschool. I think, and then finally, the CDC said that the COVID vaccine has to be added to the childhood immunization schedules, which means the governors get to decide. So all of this changes, right? All of these issues, they're all relevant, because I think the one thing not discussed beyond inflation, which is a disaster, is the COVID lockdowns. All that COVID hysteria was totally unjustified. It was unnecessary. And, you could say in 2020, we didn't know what was going to happen, and it was a big mistake. But by the end of the year, and even into 2021, the Democrats tripled down on it, right? Like, they were all into it, and then they just suddenly dropped it. And then they're all getting COVID like 6 or 7 times, right? So I don't know. I just think that's another relevant factor. It's like the issue that shall not be named. I think there are a lot of people that are very, very angry and upset about that. Just throwing it out there.
I mean, and we just saw, I think it was last week or the week before, some testing data that came out, and the numbers have dropped quite a bit. And quite frankly, I mean, that's government caused that with this virtual learning and the big push. And you go through old newspaper clippings from 2021 of certain school districts and teacher unions pushing the whole idea of, well, we want to stay virtual, we want to stay remote, we don't want to get back in the classroom, and how detrimental that was to the students in their learning. And it's a setback for them. It's a shame, and who knows how quickly or how long it's going to take for them to recover. But that was self-imposed. And
it was.
And again, we could go back to 2020. Understood, because if you think of it, that was March. At least in Ohio, it was like mid-March, I think, is when the school started to go remote. So you went March, April, May, and then maybe first week of June. But then that fall is when things started to subside with the numbers. But then again, that whole next school year, remote, right? Virtual or hybrid model. Again, and who does that impact the most? Who's impacted in a way the most negatively? It's going to be lower income people. Think, not all lower income Americans have access to high speed internet. not all lower income Americans have access to the technology to support hybrid learning or have the ability to have a parent or a guardian with them during the school day because that parent or guardian might need to be working. So it was short-sighted on the part of the education sector, or whatever you want to call it, for enforcing it as long as they did. Again, I got some slack with that 3-month time frame initially because, again, there's a lot of uncertainty. We didn't know the impact it would have on children at the time, but it became pretty clear probably 3-4 months in that this thing wasn't something that was impacting young kids as much as it was in a senior citizen with some sort of comorbidity.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely right. I think most voters will cut people slack, believe it or not. And that's why somebody like DeWine's not getting blown out. But I think my theory is the governor's races, part of the reasons why they're so close. Michigan is very tight. The Republican is leading in Nevada. And we'll get into the various states. New York is also very tight. They've had some Republicans up in that race. Glenn Youngkin last year famously won in Virginia, which is a purpley blue state. I think a lot of the reasons why these governor's races are so close is because of exactly this issue. And I think that there's a lot of concern, and nobody wants to vocalize it. But I think it's real. I think it's a factor. I'm not saying it's the top factor, but I think, it's very easy for the Republicans to talk about inflation because that's one thing that, they clearly have the advantage on. But this is another thing that's kind of bubbling out there that people don't want to talk about. And I also think crime is a big one. We basically, for 1 year, our society turned harshly against the police. We accused them of a blood libel, of murdering Black people for the sake of murdering Black people. And we, as a society, applied that broad brush, to the entirety of police, not just like a localized department, right? And the facts aren't true, right? The reality is that for whatever reason, Black people commit more crime, and then thus Black people have more interactions with the police. And once you control for the rate of interactions, the reality is Black people are killed no more than white people are once you control for that factor on a per capita basis. So the police institutions, while there may be racist police officers, and I'll even willing to say that here and there you might have corrupt police departments, police as a whole are a good thing in our society and they're a positive force. But we said to fund them and we turned against them and we slandered them. And then 2 years later, crime is up dramatically. Crime is all over. Like here in Geauga County, we've got people robbing cars, right? Murders are up in Youngstown. You probably know the statistics better than I do. Murders are up big time in Youngstown, all the major cities, Baltimore, Chicago. New York, I think, is the exception. New York has been really gentrified, but that's the other issue that nobody really wants to talk about. I mean, what we did to the police was wrong. And by the way, the police are a huge chunk. I want to say the majority are minority officers. So it's not like, there's this narrative. It's like white police officers trying to kill Black police people, right? It's totally false. And everybody was afraid to stand up to the mobs of 2020. And that issue's come into play. We're starting to see the consequences for that.
Correct. All good points. So we want to talk about our predictions. Again, we're going to go through a lot of the U.S. Senate races, the more competitive ones, obviously. Hit home some of the statewide races here in Ohio, maybe hit on a few of the local races and kind of see how we fare. I would say it's probably about 2 weeks ago. There's a day when the polling just went from one direction to the other in favor of the Republicans. And since then, it seems like they've been on a roll. And I don't quite think it was necessarily anything drastically that changed in society that caused Republicans to just all of a sudden surge ahead. I quite frankly think they were ahead all summer long. I do think when you get down to it and you switch from like a registered voter model in polling to a likely voter model, you see who's energized. The Democrats were pinning their hopes on abortion. I think it was 3 weeks ago, maybe a month ago, Biden came out and said, we're going to codify Roe versus Wade, which it's convenient that they want to do it now. They didn't do it when Barack Obama had complete control of the U.S. Senate and the U.S. House. It didn't matter then, but now it matters. And I think that obviously they have their reasons for wanting that, but the timing of it was quite convenient. Then you compound that with Biden draining our oil reserve. And it's interesting that, the whole idea of it is, we'll see how much they do this after the election. But the whole idea behind it is when gas prices, especially like in Ohio, hit $5 a gallon, they started hitting this oil reserve. They started coming down. And you're like, okay, well, we could maybe live with $3.50 a gallon gasoline. But I think most of us aren't being fooled by that, right? They tried it. It's, to me, it seems political. Again, that's coming from somebody who's more conservative leaning. I have concerns with using it, and I think we'll know for sure post-election what they end up doing, if they continue to drain it or if it magically stops, and we're just going to have to live with the fact that gas prices are going to jump to $5-6 a gallon some point next year. So let's get into it, Dane.
Where do you want to start?
Let's start in the U.S.
Bring up your little map.
I'm going to pull up the map right now.
He's got a little
Let's start
map
out west.
really cool.
There's a few interesting races out west. Let's start first in Nevada.
Okay.
Adam Laxalt going up against, I forget what her first name is, but it's Cortez. It's the last name. And what's been interesting here, and I'm going to pull up the polling data for, let's see here, give me 1 second. For Nevada,
can we color this the different colors?
Yes, we are, and we'll see if we can kind of come up with some consensus. But if you look at the poll data,
this will be cute.
Laxalt has an average in the Real Clear Politics up 1.9 points, but there's been a number of polls, as you see. This was in September where he's been up. So this is, I feel confident in for the Republicans. There's been a lot of polling data, not only in the Senate race and in the governor's race, but in the congressional races. The Democrats redistrict Nevada, and it looks like, I think they have 3, maybe 4 seats. Dan, you can correct me if I'm wrong. And I think all 3 could be toss-ups this time. And the Democrats drew them, which is quite interesting. So I'm of the belief, and I've watched the early voting data. That's one state where the early voting data can give you an idea of where it's going to. That's why I wasn't very confident in Trump's chances there in 2020, because the Democrats built, if you want to call it, some sort of firewall from early voting, especially in Clark County and Washoe County, which is Reno, the two big urban parts of the state. They built I think it was 80 to 90,000 vote edge going into election day. And rural Nevada, it's heavily Republican, but there's not nearly enough votes to eat into that. But if you're looking at it right now, I think as of last check, maybe had a 21,000 vote edge, but that's based purely on registration. The difference this time around compared to 20 and 2018 is the polling shows Republicans are faring good with independents. So that lead isn't going to be enough. So I'm of the belief that Adam Laxalt's going to pick one off from the Democrats in Nevada.
Did you know Adam Laxalt has family that was into politics? I think his father or his grandfather was a famous politician, and he was the illegitimate son of that famous politician. And he's tied into a Nevada political family, the Laxalt family. I think that there was a governor in the past in Nevada that was a Laxalt, and this current Adam Laxalt is related to him. His family goes back into Nevada politics. Look it up; it's really interesting.
That out.
Yeah, I think Nevada's red. Let's make it red. I think the governor is red. Little doubt. I would even put it. What's the next color?
You're gonna go likely.
I think it's likely Republican. Yeah, okay. I really do believe it's likely Republican.
What do you think? What do you think margin wise here?
Are you going to write this down? We can write it.
You want to update on the spreadsheet?
I don't know how to type on spreadsheets. Sure.
Nevada. Come on.
Okay, I got Michael and Dane. I
I
think
have
the
it on.
margin is R3.
Okay, I have R2.
I think
I'm gonna go with
okay.
R2.
Yeah, I think it's probably somewhere around there. So, but I think it's a pretty solid R3, R2. Yep.
Yeah, I've seen
Um,
enough, and I think we've seen polling over the last, I would say, 6 years, where if a Republican has a lead in just a handful of polls, especially even some of the mainstream, they probably do have a lead. And there's been enough polls in Nevada to show that Adam Laxalt is up. There was one
yeah.
out today, two actually out today that came out. I know this USA Today one's in between, but these two that were up +5, I believe, came out today. So I'm of the belief that Adam Laxalt's going to win. But it's Nevada, and it is a state that the Democrats have carried the last few cycles. But I think because of the independent vote, those are going to go. That state is going to go Republican.
I always tend to discount Republicans in the West and add Republican votes in the Midwest, if that makes sense. So for like a state like Nevada, if it's R+5, I'll discount to say R+3. But if it's a Midwestern state and it's R+2 or 3, I'll give it a couple more. Why don't we go to Wisconsin, Michael? Can we move on to the great state
Let's
of
go.
Wisconsin?
Yeah, so we have Ron Johnson, the incumbent, going up.
It,
Oh God, I'm going to butcher the. I know it's Barnes is the last
it's
name.
Mandela, isn't it? Mandela.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. So I think this is one where I think it's the same color as Nevada, and I think my buddy Ron Johnson, who I think is underrated as a senator, pulls it out. So I give it R5. And
I tend to.
What are you going to give the Republican margin?
I would agree with you there. I wouldn't be surprised if it's more, but it is Wisconsin, and that's a state that Governor Walker, Scott Walker, won a few times by razor thin margins, and then Trump won it narrowly. Or actually, no, he won it by a decent margin in 2016. Only lost it by like 20,000 votes in 2020. So
yeah,
it's a tight state, but again, just because of where independents are leaning Republican and Democrat enthusiasm is down, I think that's enough that it gives Ron Johnson a comfortable margin.
I think there's this type of voter out there, and the type of voter is, call it like a white guy in his 30s or 40s, or white woman. It's a suburban voter, and they like to pretend that they're independent and above politics. I call them the Tommy Metzinger voter. And they've got conservative inclinations, but for whatever reason, sometimes they'll latch on to something that Republicans do, and they'll be like, I've just had it up to here, and they'll vote blue. And I think they do that so that they can kind of keep up their independent bona fides. I think there are a lot of those voters in the state of Wisconsin. I think it's a naturally small C conservative state, but only like a little bit. And I think that they'll tend, especially in the modern political dynamics, to vote Republican. But I do think they like to vote Democrat for like governors and for senators, just to show that they've got that independent streak, right? But I think Barnes is a little too far out there. The economy's too poor. These independent voters are probably going to vote Republican. They won't be proud of it. They won't admit it. But I think they turn, and I think the Republican grassroots are fired up. Democratic turnout's depressed. Either way, we can agree it's that nice strawberry red. What state do you want to go to?
Let's go to one that I think is going to end up going Democrat, but is surprisingly competitive, which is Washington. So you have Patty Murray, the incumbent, going up. God, is it Tiffany Smiley? And there's 4 polls out in the past 2 weeks that give Murray a 4.3 edge. This is a race that nobody saw on the radar screen. Occasionally in presidential years, we see a Republican maybe getting the single digits in a poll, like down 8-9 points. But 2 polls out in the last few days. One has Murray up 2, one has Murray up 1, one of which is Trafalgar. So this is one I think Patty Murray's going to pull it out. The fact that it's competitive speaks to, I think, just the enthusiasm gap, right? Democrats aren't excited to come out. Independents are backing Republicans, and the Republicans are energized.
So I used to live in Washington, fun fact. And what a lot of people don't realize is that outside of Seattle, the state is fairly red. Once you get east of the Cascade Mountains, Spokane and the Yakima Valley are really Republican areas. They look more like an Idaho. It's just Seattle is so large and it's predominant. I am going to say that this is a D6 state. I don't fully believe the polls. I think that Seattle is just too overwhelmingly blue, but Seattle is one of these states, or these cities rather, that have been really affected by the recent crime wave, and the downtowns have become difficult. But I still think it goes blue. But what are your colors on blue? What shades do we have there, Michael?
We got the same shades. We got a light blue, likely. I would think it's likely.
I say it's likely. Yeah. What are you going to put it as? D what?
I'll go with D5.
D5. Okay. So it's tight, right? But
yeah.
Okay. Where do you want to go next, Mr. Metzinger?
All right. Let's go down to Arizona. This is a tight one.
Ooh.
You have Senator Kelly, who he's a former astronaut, correct?
Yeah, he's an astronaut. He's in space.
So he's going up against Blake. Is it Blake Masters? I'm bad with all these first names. I apologize. We're up against Blake Masters. So Kelly's been up primarily most of this election cycle. There are very few polls that have showed Blake Masters ahead. Actually, from what I could see, I don't even see single one up until recent where there was a tie. But every single poll has Mark Kelly up. What's interesting here is I feel very confident in the governor's race there. Kari Lake is she's polling better. She seems to be polling maybe 3-4 points ahead of Blake Masters. And I feel comfortable that she's going to win. This is a tight one. This one's going to come down to late momentum. This one to me is like of all the states, I feel like this is the pure toss-up one that I'm not real confident on either which way. I think based on the polling, if you believe it, Kelly's going to be ahead. He'll probably win by a point or two. But this is one where, we're less than a week out. Late break, could see Blake Masters pull ahead.
Here's my problem, Michael, and I'm wrestling with this one too. Arizona is a really tough state. It's increasingly purple. You've got the California exodus, right, colonizing it. If you believe that Kari Lake is up, and I think you and I both believe that, what is the voter? Who is the voter that votes for somebody like Kari Lake, who the media has portrayed as this extremist, and then turns around and votes for Mark Kelly, right? Who is that voter? I think if you get to the point where you're like, I'm going to vote for Kari Lake, you then do not go and vote for the Democrat. So earlier I predicted that this state was a blue state. I think it goes narrowly for Blake Masters. And I think it's like R1, and I think it's tight. But I do think that Kari Lake pulls him up, makes him palatable. They kind of run as a ticket. And I think it pulls him across the finish line. And I think Arizona is like, remember that voter I described in Wisconsin? There are a lot of voters that they want to pretend to be independent. I think there are a lot of those guys in Arizona. That's why they liked McCain so much. So I'm going to put it as R2. R2.
Wow.
What do you put it as?
And somebody sent me a tweet from Rich Barris, who we had on a few years ago. He's polling Arizona right now, and it reads, and this is 5 minutes ago, independents in Arizona have shifted considerably since our last poll. My guess, if he's tweeting it, that means it's going in favor of Blake Masters. That would be my guess. But what's interesting here is if you kind of go back, I'm looking at 2018, McSally versus Sinema. McSally had a lead in the polls. Sinema ended up winning. 2020.
McSally was a weak candidate, and Sinema had that independent streak. But keep going. Sorry. Yeah.
But then on the flip side in 2020, Mark Kelly, because this was the seat to fill McCain, correct, in 2020, he had an average lead of 5.7 points, but ended up only winning over McSally by 2.4. And that was in a weak year for Republicans, at least weak in terms of we lost the presidency, right?
Right.
I'm torn on this. If you had based on what I currently see, I would give Mark Kelly the ever so slight edge, but I would say like less than like a half a point.
Okay.
This is one where I might have to tweet out my final prediction, but based on what I see right now, I'm not quite there yet. I feel like I'm going with Kari Lake in the governor's race +3, but I'll say Mark Kelly +0.5. That's just me, though.
So what
I'm going to leave it as gray for right now for us, since we're not in agreement on that.
Okay. Well, Florida should be red. I don't think there's any doubt in Florida. Your man DeSantis.
Yeah, the only reason I wanted to touch on governor's race there as well. Yes.
Sorry.
It's not a matter of whether the Republicans are going to win. The question is how much.
Oh, a lot. Florida for Senate, like R plus R6 or R7, R7, sure. So what would that translate into? That would be like 55 Rubio, 43 Deming? No, 55, 47. Oh, geez. I think, yeah, maybe it's R8. I'm going to go even higher. I think Rubio gets like 55% of the vote. She gets like 47 or something like that.
Is there a third party in that race? Do we know?
I assume so. There will be.
Yeah, you're probably right. I'm going to go a little higher. I'll go Rubio +10. And just for, I know we're talking U.S. Senate, but let's talk about the governor's race real quick. Ron DeSantis going up against former governor Charlie Crist. I think that one has the ability to be DeSantis +13 or 14. I don't think that one's even going to be remotely close. I think the early voting data in Miami-Dade County, which used to be a Democrat stronghold, right? As of right now, the Republicans have a lead in terms of ballots cast, and that is just catastrophic for the Democrats. This is a county that, correct me here, Dane, but I feel like went in 2016, in previous cycles, was as much as 25, maybe 30 points to the Democrats. And the fact the Republicans have a chance to win it this time around at the governor and U.S. Senate level makes me think that Governor DeSantis is in for a rout up there with when Jeb Bush won the state by 13. I think he has a chance of winning by even more than 13 points.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. I'd say R +15, but it'll be good. Yeah. Make it red. Make it deep red.
Yeah, that's
nice scarlet red. Solid Republican.
Solid red. Solid
Why
Republican.
don't we go to the great state of Ohio?
Let's do it.
This is going to be an interesting one. So in Ohio, my man Vance versus Tim Ryan. I think it is Vance 5.
Yeah, actually, I tweeted out some of my predictions for Ohio. I think it was yesterday, and I tend to agree with you there. There's a lot of polling out. The average right now has Vance up 2.2, but what's pretty consistent is there has been, looks like one poll, maybe two, since August that has had Ryan even up. Every poll pretty much is Vance up, and if you base it on historical polling results in Ohio, the errors the last couple cycles have kind of been to the tune of about 6 to 8 points here in Ohio. So when you look at Real Clear Politics, they're doing something interesting. They're looking at the current breakdown in the polling, and they look at 2016 and 2020 to see how much the polls underestimated the Republicans in those cases, or the Democrats if there was ever a state like that.
Right.
And based on that, they have Vance +8.2. I'm not quite there. I'd like to think they've done a better job of polling Ohio, but I tend to agree. I think right now I would say Vance +5. And we've talked about why a Democrat could win here in Ohio, and it's using the Sherrod Brown playbook. And I have my whole thoughts on it. I think that Vance's campaign made a strategic error in the summertime because they waited essentially till Labor Day to really start pouring money in. And it could have just been the fact they didn't have the money to do it, but the Democrats poured money in over the summer to try to define Tim Ryan as a moderate. He talks about, I was with Trump on China. I'm against Biden on,
he wasn't.
What's that?
That's a lie.
Well, I get that. They're trying to portray him as a Sherrod Brown, old school, moderate type Democrat that resonates, that would have fared well in Ohio a decade ago. But we all know that's not how he is. He portrays it, but he votes 100% of the time with Joe Biden. And then at the same time, they've also tried to paint J.D. Vance as this, out of touch, this guy from California who came in, this Trumpian type candidate, and this and that. So they got a head start. They defined this race. What's worked in Vance's favor is the simple fact that Ohio's moved red, I think, and it has. But I think that error, and again, it could have just been the fact they didn't have the money, cost them, and they made this race far more competitive than it should have ever been. But Tim Ryan's doing what he had to do, which is, try to act like he's Sherrod Brown, try to act like he's an old school Democrat, try to pick off some of those Trump type voters that abandon the Democrats and try to get them to, try to back him.
Yeah, I think it's put it. What are the Reds? What are the Reds? Let me see your little Reds. I think it's likely a Republican. So not the scarlet red, but the strawberry red. So, okay, we're in agreement. We're both R+5.
Yeah, I would go with that. Would I be surprised if it ends up being a little bit more? But I do want to make one point.
Yeah.
And this is the point. We saw it in 2020. Because of how Ohio counts the ballots, the initial batch of votes that come in from each county are the absentee and early vote, which tends to be heavily Democrat. So if you remember 2020, Joe Biden had this big lead of 10, 12 points. And I remember Chuck Todd and all these other Democrat pundits looking at it like, oh my God, Ohio, look at Ohio. But it didn't take very long once they started counting Election Day votes, which probably went something to the tune of like 70-30 for the Republicans, where the Democrat lead just cratered and the Republicans took the lead. So just don't be surprised. Don't be alarmed come election night when Tim Ryan has a lead and Nan Whaley maybe has it in single digits. She doesn't stand a chance. But just be careful or be cognizant of that because they're going to try to make you panic. But I think once the Election Day votes come in, Vance will pull ahead. And once he pulls ahead, it's going to be over.
Chuck Todd isn't that smart. I don't know why he's a pundit. Like, what does he do to be a pundit? I don't get it. But yeah, okay. Let's go to. I want to go to Pennsylvania. Okay, I want to.
This is a fascinating race.
I feel like, first of all, Fetterman is a slob. He's just a total disgusting slob. And it's not because of his politics. Like, what I don't like about Fetterman is he shows you what elites think the working class is. And that is an overweight, hoodie-wearing slob, right? Like, do they not have any respect? He has never worked. He doesn't have a job. He just ran for mayor of Braddock and when he was like 50. And until then, he just lived off of his parents' inherited wealth. He is the of all the Democrats running, I dislike him the most. And I actually like Oz because I feel like Oz, he's squishy. I think I'm probably far more to the right than he is. Keep in mind, though, it's a purple state, so you got to do what you got to do to win. And he has put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. And what I always respected in candidates, and this is one of the reasons why I respect Sherrod Brown, is you got to put the time and effort in the campaign. You got to hit the ground. You got to run. You got to shake the hands, kiss the babies, right? And somebody like Sherrod Brown, the reason he was able to win in Ohio so much is because he did that. I'm not saying I'm going to vote for him. I'm just saying that was his like shtick, right? And Oz has done that. So I feel like Oz has done well. Of course, Fetterman had the stroke, and that didn't help him. And he shouldn't be running. He's sick. Like it was weird on Twitter. The Democrats were like, "Well, disabled Americans. If you're against Fetterman, you're against disabled Americans." Well, no, right? Like I think somebody that is like handicapped, like Greg Abbott of Texas, who's in a wheelchair, have no problem with them serving. If he was blind, right? David Patterson was a decent governor of New York, and I believe he was completely legally blind. It's not about handicaps. It's about the man, unfortunately, as a result of a stroke, is mentally deficient. And ideally, the senator, you'd want them to be a bright individual. So, all that said, I am going. I don't trust the electorate in Pennsylvania. I never have. I think that they always say that they're Republican, but they don't actually vote Republican, and they keep electing horrible governors. But I do think Oz pulls this out, and I go R2. It's conservative, but I think it happens.
Yeah, no, and let's talk briefly about that debate last week. I think, forget the political aspect of it. It was tough to watch. I don't. It's not a joking matter for somebody to have a stroke, but what's upsetting to me is that his family and his advisors put him out for that. They knew how he was, and
his wife knew.
Went after this. NBC said, "Yeah, oh yeah, she definitely knew." But they all went after the NBC reporter a few weeks ago when they had that interview where he had the TV to give him the questions, and she said before that he couldn't quite understand the conversation, and the media and his wife attacked her like crazy, and she ended up being right. She was vindicated, and it was just tough to watch. And I think the worst part of that was the question about fracking and his complete flip-flop. And because of the damage from the stroke, first off, there was the awkward pause with most of his answers because he had to read the closed captioning. But he struggled. He couldn't quite put it together to say why he was for fracking and maybe why he flip-flopped on the issue. It was, to me, probably the worst thing I've ever seen in a debate ever.
Yeah.
And that was not just from the stroke. That was also just from a political mistake by him. He said, and give credit to the moderator for calling him out. This is what you said 3 years ago. What changed? And we all know he's full of it. He isn't for fracking. He's just saying what he has to say to get elected. But again, I think shame on his family for putting him out there, his advisors, the Democrat Party. They hit him for months. The stroke happened 4 days before the primary, and obviously there's probably not much you could do there. People already were casting ballots, but they knew going into this race, and they were trying to hide him. And the debate was awful. And I don't know if it's his wife is hoping that she gets appointed. If
yes, 100%.
If her husband ends up winning, but I think there's just major damage there. And Oz is a reasonable type Republican. Maybe call him more wishy-washy, and he might be. But this is Pennsylvania. This isn't a dark red state. This is a true toss-up state, and he's the type of guy who I think will win there. I think not only independents who are I'm only going R1.5, and I'm only saying that because I do think going into that debate, Fetterman probably had a 3-4 point lead, but I think he did a lot of damage. But it's still Pennsylvania. There's still a ton of votes in Philadelphia. But I think ultimately, if you're a Democrat watching that, you're not real enthused to go out to vote for this guy. If anything, you're just enthused to maybe vote for him with the hopes that Shapiro wins and they appoint somebody else. But I'd say R1.5 there. Oz is the next senator from Pennsylvania.
Are you like me, Michael? You just don't trust Pennsylvania?
Yeah, and I feel like it's going to be similar to, well, who knows how the results will come in. But if you remember in 2016, it was to the last minute. Democrats were up all night, and it was to that last batch of votes. I just worry about, Philadelphia. It's such a huge batch of votes, and it usually goes 80 to 85% for the Democrats. But I think what will work in Oz's favor, I think he's likable enough with those suburban voters, especially women. And I don't think the abortion issue is nearly as prevalent as the Democrats were hoping it would be. So I think it'll be enough, but it shouldn't even be that close. It should be Oz going away, but it is Pennsylvania, and but we'll take the win.
Yeah, agreed. Well, let's go. Can I switch? Can we go to North Carolina just real quick?
Yeah, this one's
I think that one's I think it's like R5. I don't know. I really haven't seen polling, but I'm going to say R5.
Yeah, that's an interesting state. And I don't know. I love geography, and when I think of North Carolina, I think of like Charlotte. I think of the Research Triangle. I think it's like Raleigh, Durham, that whole area. There's a lot of universities there, so probably a lot more higher educated individuals, students, people that you would align more with the Democrat Party, but somehow election after election, even though they're tight, the Republicans still find ways to win there. I think that's going to be the case again here. I'd say maybe even R+6.
Wow. Okay. R6. Okay. Can you make it the nice strawberry? Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Strawberry like that color?
No. That's scarlet. Strawberry. You had it right. Thank you.
There we go.
Okay. And now let's go to New Hampshire, where I have a lightning hot take. The polls have recently tightened. Hassan is flailing. I think the New Hampshire voter, to me, the New England type voters are people they don't like the religious right at all, but they are not socialists. They're these weird independent voters. And I think that the average New Hampshire voter is really mad about inflation. And I am going to say that New Hampshire, okay, you ready for this, is R1. I think it goes Republican. I really do. I think it's going to be the surprise of the night.
Well, it's interesting because there was a poll that came out today from, I think it's St. Anselm. I think it's a university in New Hampshire. It had Bullock. I'm probably butchering his name. He served in the military. Don Bullock. I'm going to say the name. Him up 1. And this is one that's kind of, nobody really thought much of it. Hassan, or whatever her name is, kind of had a 6 to 10 point lead, or upper single digit lead for much of this race. But I think, again, it was probably 3 weeks ago when things really kind of shifted. And I think once you really get into the likely voter model and have a better idea who's going to come out to vote, I think you see the Republicans are going to come out. Less Democrats are probably going to come out. I agree with you. I think this one, I feel more, it's funny because I feel confident about New Hampshire than I do Arizona.
Me too.
So slight.
My man, Michael.
But there,
Michael Messinger.
The New Hampshire voter perfectly, I think. They're a very unique bunch because if you look right to the west there, you got Vermont, which is liberal la-la land right there. And and even parts of Maine, because there is that congressional district in Maine that has gone Republican.
And Maine has voted for Paul LePage as the governor.
Correct. Who I believe is running again. I know he's not the sitting governor, but he's running. And remember, you think of Maine, you think of Susan Collins, who in 2020 never had a lead. Remember? Never had a lead in the polls. And she won by 10 plus points?
Yeah.
So it's a goofy country in terms of polling.
Goofy.
New Hampshire is a strange state when it comes to like geography, and they don't. If you ever watch on election night, they don't have it broken out by county. They have it like broken out by municipality on the map. So you're thinking there's like 250 counties on the freaking map, and there are all these little municipalities. It's strange how they report their votes. So I'm with you. I think that of all the surprises of the night, that's going to be the one that's going to really shock some people.
I'm glad we're agreed there, Mr. Metzinger. Can you scroll up a little bit so we can see what the Senate balance is, and then we'll get to Georgia?
So we're at 52-46.
We got a Republicans flip the Senate. Yeah, like duh.
Yeah.
Like, come on.
Yeah.
Let's go to Georgia. I am nervous about Georgia. I don't trust Georgia. I don't feel like I have a good handle on it. But I think it goes Republican because I think that, I don't know. I'm going to say R2. I think it's tight. There might be a runoff. I don't know. I honestly don't know. I'm going to say R2 just because I'm feeling pretty bullish, but I don't believe it.
Yeah, I tend to think it'll be a runoff. So, I guess it's kind of a moot point. I think Walker will end up ahead, and then it'll go to a runoff, which is just, I understand the whole idea of a runoff, but God, those political consultants and those TV markets and radio markets down there got to make a killing off these damn things in recent cycles. So yeah, I tend to agree with you there. I don't think there's anything in the polling that makes me think that any of the two are going to hit that 50% threshold that they need, 50 plus 1. And so I'm going to go with you. I think election night Walker's probably going to be ahead. He'll maybe have 49%, but I have a hard time believing either of the two are going to have 50%, and that'll go to runoff.
So you R2?
I'll go R2.
Okay. Make it the nice
probably
little,
like a 40, I don't know, it could be like I could see Walker at like 49.5 and
Warnock at like 47.
Warnock, yeah, 47 and a half, something like that. But
yeah,
I do think the Republicans, I feel much better about the Republican chances this time around than I did with the runoffs a couple of years ago and how that all ended up. I wasn't very confident at all there. I feel confident. I think at the top of the ticket, Governor Kemp's going to steamroll Stacey Abrams, who still, we could talk all we want about 2020 and the Republicans saying, still has not that race, remember, from whenever that was. But I think her political days are going to come to an end. It's going to win by a big margin.
She's an election denier. So what do we have it? So we're pretty much aligned.
So,
I think you and I are agreed.
I think ultimately, we could go state by state like this. I think 52 or 53 seats is probably the number for the Republicans. If it's a great night, Nate, you can get to 54. What's that?
Make it pink. Make it pink.
Okay, I'll make it pink. So you probably have 54, and I would say 53.
Yeah, and I think that's right. I think that's about right. It'll probably be there. Part of me thinks though that there might, like, you and I might even be too conservative. Like, I saw some polls that show that Pritzker, who's running for governor of Illinois is tight. I've also seen the New York governor's race, which is supposed to be tight. So I just want to put this out there. You and I are kind of playing it safe, I think, and we kind of got burned on 2020.
You were more accurate than me. I kind of bought some of the late movement in polling, which didn't. I just think Trump was just behind in too many states that it was going to be too hard to happen.
I part of me thinks though that we could be in for a political earthquake because the inflation issue is really, really big, and there's a lot going on. And I think people are really upset about this. And I think that they rightly identify the Democrats as responsible for this. And they are. Make no doubt about it. The Democrats are absolutely responsible for the current predicament. If they say, well, it's Ukraine, that's a lie. Inflation started well before the Ukrainian war of February 2022. So I think that we could be in for potentially an earthquake where there are races that we had no idea were close, where the Republican is winning or like coming within a couple of points. Like, I really think that something's going on under the surface. What have the Democrats campaign? Like, seriously, this has been political malpractice. It's just been abortion. It's been literally abortion. And I think the average American, not saying this is my position, just the average American, probably wants abortion legal in the first trimester, banned in the third trimester, and with limits somewhere in the middle of the second trimester, right? So 12 to 20 weeks of pregnancy. And that's where Europe has settled on. And I think that's probably where America will settle on. But like the Democrats, they have nothing to go on but abortion. That's it.
You're right. I mean, that's literally... you take that decision out. Let's say the Supreme Court on it this year. They literally have nothing to go to their base with to try to get them fired up to come to the polls. Nothing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, cost of living through the roof. With gas prices, grocery. Going out to eat. Freaking Wendy's now. A combo meal is $9.99. A combo meal at a fast food restaurant. I mean, it's insane. You see it everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's going to be an ugly winter because of heating bills. And
yes.
I was fortunate to get back into my township aggregate where I live in Ohio. So I'm buying myself one more year of somewhat lower rates. But boy, for those people who might be on maybe a variable plan, I mean, the price is going to be, I feel terrible for, I'm fortunate enough that I could afford it. I could take it on. Not that I want to. But think of somebody who truly is living paycheck to paycheck and who's going to have to deal with a heating bill double of what it was last winter just to keep their house warm.
Yeah.
And, they're going to have to make a decision. Do we keep the heat on, or, do we throw an extra blanket on? Things that it's a damn shame in 2022 we even have to be talking about, because natural gas prices 2-3 years ago were dirt cheap. And look now.
Well, Michael, the big shoe to drop is, you talked about this at the beginning of the show. It's the SPR, the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. They have been draining that as an effort to keep gas prices low. That ends in November, right when the midterms are over, and oil is going to shoot up like a spring because the production is tight and demand is still strong. And I think we're going to move higher with oil prices, and I think gas prices are going to go back up. So you add in the heating prices, you add in the gas prices, you add in the food prices, and Americans are really suffering the worst economic crisis since 2008. And I think in 2023, the next shoe to drop is that the job market starts to give out, because companies start to lay off, and as consumers start to pull back spending. I'm not going to go into the whole thing, but I do think we're in for some troubling times. And part of me even thinks that the Democrats are going to throw this election to the Republicans because they'll be able to take office into the middle of a massive recession. And I think that might explain the reason these campaigns have been so weak.
Yeah.
I don't know, but
how quickly do you think they're going to blame the Republicans for inflation?
Day one, I think the day after the election, gas prices start going up and they blame the Republicans. I mean, it's amazing. See, here's the thing that gets me, Michael, I get really mad about, is that the supposed independents who complained about Donald Trump, right? We are in such a worse position now than we were at any point under Trump's presidency. Like, where are all these independent voters that are like, oh, I can't take the mean tweets? Like, things are horrible now. And is Biden 100% responsible? No. But in every single case, he's made the situation worse, not better. How quickly the times change, it's sad.
Yeah. Without a doubt. So we're in agreement, 53, 54 seats. Let's talk a little bit about some of the governor's races real quick. Yeah. Let's talk about our home state of Ohio. And I remember I think we nailed this back in the primary. DeWine's problem wasn't going to be the general. It was going to be the primary. And he, benefited, quite frankly, from the fact that there was a split DeWine vote between Joe Blystone and Jim Renacci. And I was of the belief that, once DeWine got to the general, it wasn't going to be close, because I just felt he was going to just win big with independents and get a lot of people across. I think probably a lot of Republicans aren't thrilled that he's nominee, but when it gets down to it, I would not be surprised if he got to, Rob Portman type outcome, even John Kasich, I think, in his second term, and win by 20 points. I don't think that one's going to be remotely close.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Can we talk about Bob Hagan? Isn't it crazy that Bob Hagan is back in action and is running for Senate and is going to lose? He's going to get blown out. Like, there's zero doubt in my mind.
And here's what I'll say. In terms of, like, Republicans, obviously I admire Governor DeSantis at the national level. Yeah. But when it comes to local politics, the Republican I admire the most, without a doubt, is Michael Rowley. I think I have so much respect for that guy. He's literally works all the time at his grocery store, which I actually went to today on my lunch break. And he fights. He's a tireless fighter for economic development and opportunities in the Mahoning Valley. He is constantly involved in things at Youngstown State University with the, just with the university and Trestle and trying to build that relationship up and look for opportunities for students there. But also just north of his district, your neck of the woods, in Trumbull County, your former neck of the woods, a county that he doesn't even represent, and he's doing all he can to bring in economic opportunities with the electric vehicle manufacturing. You have the $2 billion Altium plant. You have Foxconn taking over the former GM plant. There's things happening out there, and he's the guy out there fighting for our area. Not Tim Ryan. It's Michael Rowley. And again, that's not even his district.
No,
that's
he's going
Trumbull
to be
County.
the congressman eventually.
Yeah. And that's why back when the redistricting was occurring, I was fighting hard. And no offense to Bill Johnson, but he lives down in Marietta. Now, granted, I believe his son is a student at Youngstown State or is coming to Youngstown State, which is good. So he has that connection here. But I want somebody from the Mahoning Valley fighting for the Mahoning Valley. That's why I was a big proponent of like a Ashtabula to Columbiana or Steubenville type district. I had my doubts if the Republicans would ever do it because obviously they're not going to draw out an incumbent Republican. But that's why I wanted, because I wanted a seat drawn in favor of Michael Rowley because I thought for sure he'd be the type of person that he would go to Washington and fight for our area. And that's what I want from our politicians locally.
I think Rowley is a great guy. I totally second that. I also think he's the type of Republican I like. He's not a warmonger. He's kind of more of a populist Republican, but he's intelligent. He's professional. He's a hard worker. We got to get him on the show. Yeah.
He's aware of us. I do know that. And one of the things I definitely want to have him on the show after he soundly defeats Bob Hagan is to talk about things like economic development and things in the pipeline. I just kind of want to pick his brain, kind of see maybe where he sees things going locally and maybe try to get an idea of his ambitions. I think he really ran in 2018 for the right reasons. Like this isn't something that he wants to do for the political purpose. Some people just want to run just to get into politics and they want that. Like, I think he saw the need to run, right?
Yeah.
And he's doing his best to serve. And that's why I have so much respect for him.
Do you, why has Bob Hagan fallen off? Why is he like a Facebook troll? Like, isn't that pathetic? Does anybody else like see that and is like, what's going on there? He's like a Facebook troll. He's like trolling people on Facebook.
Yeah, Facebook, Twitter. He has like a thin skin on him.
Yeah,
much to trigger him.
He doesn't. Yeah, it's sad. And the other thing is, have you seen that the guy running for Congress locally? Like, here's the other big thing with the redistricting. Youngstown's going to have a Republican congressman, right?
Correct.
Dave Joyce in the north and Bill Johnson in the south. Is Lou Lycris, who ran as a Republican, is he running against Bill Johnson or Dave Joyce?
He's running against Bill Johnson. And this is one thing I don't understand. I think he did run a business of some sort. But at some point in time, you got to ask yourself, is it worth putting all this money, especially in the district with Bill Johnson? That race is not going to be remotely close. I expect Bill Johnson to get 65 to 70% of the vote, even with Mahoning and part of Trumbull in there. I don't think it's going to be remotely close. And I just don't understand. Like, he ran 2 years ago as a Republican, and some of the local Republicans were calling him out. That's when Christina Hagan was running and said, like, if you look at this guy, he was just looking to try to get in and try to find an easy path. But, yeah, that I don't quite get Lou Lyris and what he's trying to do.
What's amazing, I was just looking up Dave Joyce's new district and Matt Kilboy, and it's the 5 counties of Ashtabula, Trumbull, Portage, Geauga, and Lake. And 10 years ago, that would have been a Democratic district by far. Ashtabula,
correct.
Blue. Trumbull, blue. Portage, light blue. Lake, I think, was a blue county. Geauga is the only red oasis in the middle there. Nowadays, it's a Republican stronghold. Like, how much politics has changed. The Democrats locally, they're running Bob Hagan. Like, just stop and think about that. Their strongest candidate is Bob Hagan. They've fallen. He's a racist. He called a black man buckwheat. That's not nice. That's a horrible term. If I called a black man buckwheat, I would feel shame because that would be horrible. I would never do that. But Bob Hagan did. He is what has he done with his life? Right? I know Ursula loves to worship Bob Hagan like he's the second coming of our Christ, but he's not. He's not the second coming of Christ. He's Bob Hagan. He's a failed politician. And that's who the Democrats have. It's so sad. And then one more, can we talk about this Vince Peterson? running against our
Yes.
man Nick Santucci. Nick Santucci has run a great campaign, a fantastic, flawless campaign. He's such a good guy. He's such a genuine guy. Nothing but love for Nick Santucci. He's so famous now, he'll probably never be on this show again, but that's okay. And he's running against this
He better.
Yeah, he's running against this Vince Peterson, and this guy. There's a video out there. I don't know if you've seen this, Michael, where he's like ranting in a church. Oh, he's going on and he's ranting against the police. He's ranting against white people. He's a divider. He's not a uniter. He's an angry man. Why do we want him representing us? I want Nick Santucci to win so much. And then Warren would be completely red. Maybe McNally wins in the Youngstown House District, but then the Senate's red. We're just taking over. We're redding. We're making everything red.
It's I agree with you with Santucci. If you ask me like of somebody who I feel like I'm most like, if I were to ever run, which I have no desire to run.
You will. Oh, you will.
I'll probably get suckered in at some point in time. I would say I'm most like a Nick Santucci. Like I would run my campaign the same way. He's really tried to keep it positive. Really tried to sell his credentials, his previous experience working for Chamber, some stuff with his education background as well. Tout why he's running. He's not just running. Again, he's not one of these guys running just to, because he has a big ego. He doesn't have a big ego. He drove around his district. He saw there was issues. We had him on this show. He's running for the right reasons. He wants to go to Columbus and fight to make that part of Trumbull County better. And I give him a lot of respect. And there's a lot of potential in Trumbull County right now with, again, what's everything happening out at Lordstown. I know there's the Port Authority owns a site in Warren, the former RG Steel site. It's one of I think the largest site that Jobs Ohio has in its portfolio of potential land spots for companies. So there's some things happening, and you got to have leadership in place. And I think he because of that experience with the Chamber, he's a perfect kind of guy to kind of work with local economic development efforts, work with Columbus to try to get things done. And I hope it's a district that was drawn in a way that would be slightly democratic, but I don't think it necessarily matters. I think he's going to win. He's going to win over the independents. I would say if you had to, give me, I'd say Santucci plus, 5 or 6. I feel that confident in him.
I think it might be a little tighter, but I do think he wins. Yeah.
I think when it gets down to it, and I haven't checked like the early voting in Trumbull County to see, how it's been looking. I think that Republicans are going to be, if you ask me who's going to be energized to come out in Ohio, I think it's the Republican voters. And I mean, if you also got to remember, Tim Ryan in 2020 lost Trumbull County, that portion of his district, which included, most, if not all, of Nick Santucci territory. So again, even though it's drawn in a way that's again a little bit more beneficial for a Democrat because of inner city Warren, I think Santucci could pull it out. I'm pulling for him. I've been tweeting up a storm in favor of him in recent days and hoping for the best. He's confident in the fact that the Republican Party in the state has dumped money into this race. He constantly has had radio advertisements up. Leads me to believe that they feel confident they could pull it off.
Yeah, I think he pulls it out, man. I think he's our guy, Nick Santucci for president one day. He's a good dude. He is a good dude. Well, I think that's it. Any other thing to predict?
No, the only other ones I would say. So we didn't have them on. So there's a county commissioner seat in Mahoning County.
Gino DeFabio. Gino the man. Yeah.
And so here's my take on that race. I think it's gonna be tight. I do think Carol Remedios Rigetti has the edge, and let me explain why. So first off, she's been in politics for a long time, and some people like that. Obviously, we don't. But she has that name recognition. Gino has name recognition, but she has that name recognition. I was listening, I think Ron Verb was talking about this, Dan Rivers. When you're looking for like a single issue to nail her on, there's really nothing necessarily that jumps out at you that says, I'm going to get her on this or I'm going to get her on that. And I think you hear Gino, he talks about Oak Hill, which I agree with him on. I think it's a money pit. It's cost the taxpayers too much money. I just still think if you look back in 2020, I think his name was Steve Kristen ran against Dave Ditzler. I thought Kristen ran a pretty good race, and he still lost by, I think, 11 points countywide. At the prosecutor level, the Republicans had a great prosecutor candidate, Hardy Desmond, who worked under Paul Gaines, had all the credentials in the world, still lost by 10 points. So I have this feel. I think Gino is going to keep it close. I think it's probably going to be a 5-point race, but I think we're getting closer. The movement's happening. I think Remigio Righetti is going to pull that one out, would be my guess. I think
you're wrong.
I could be. I will say this, and this isn't really a knock on Gino. I've heard this of other candidates locally as well in previous cycles. I don't like the idea of nationalizing local, especially like a county race. And I heard his commercial and talking about like inflation and certain like more national items that, from my perspective, and obviously I'm no expert on this, if I'm like running for a local issue, like I would try to pinpoint like what is wrong with Mahoning County. We keep losing population. We're losing opportunities on jobs. We have Oak Hill. Here are the things that I would do differently. And I haven't heard that so much. And I heard, Ron Verb and even and Dan Rivers kind of hinted that as well. And I think both of them are pulling for Gino, but I think they've kind of echoed similar sentiments. And so, we'll see. I think in terms of name recognition in Mahoning County for Republicans, he has it. But does he have the background? Do enough independents look at him and say, okay, he's a truck driver. He's well known. He knows the political arena, but does he have the experience to give him the keys to one of the 3 commissioner seats? So that's kind of my view of how that race might pan out.
I think he wins. I think he pulls it out. I think people want change. I think it's a perfect setup for a Republican win in Mahoning Valley. I think he wins. I think people vote against Democrats because they're mad over national issues, and that affects the local. Carroll has been in there too long. I think he pulls it out. I think he wins. My gut tells me he pulls it out and wins. There's so much excitement and enthusiasm. He's a well-known, different. He's the first time there's been a credible challenger for the Mahoning commissioner seat. I think people want something different. And I think, quite frankly, Mahoning County taxes are way too high. I think he wins. I think he wins 100%. I'm going to disagree with you there, Mr.
Again, we shall see. And again, I'm only... I'm observing things. I kind of gone to his website and look at the issues. There's only really 2 issues there. Again, if I were in his shoes, I would kind of pinpoint on like 3-4 things and really hit home on those things. And it's hard with a commissioner seat because there's 2 other commissioners to really look at Mahoning County and say, okay, where are things going south? And again, I echoed what I think would be the talking points, I guess, if you would. And so, again, can I be wrong? Certainly, but I think I've heard, again, I talked about Ron Verb, Dan Rivers. I heard some of the callers in recent days kind of talk about Gino's ad and kind of just not overly enthusiastic about supporting him. Kind of the way, again, nationalizing, talk about national issues in a local commissioner's race. I don't know if I understand the why, right? I understand why he would do it because it's going to get the Republicans out to support him, right? But you still got to win over independents, and you still got to pick off some Democrats as well, I think. So we'll see. I think it's going to be tight. It's definitely going to be the tightest of all the commissioners' races in a long time. If it's not 2022, I think the Republicans' chances in Mahoning County are coming quickly.
Michael, what are you going to be doing on election night?
I'm probably going to be camped out on my chair here where I famously stayed up till 3:30 in the morning in 2016. I'm hoping for a miracle, and a miracle happened that night. I'm not hoping for a miracle this time because I fully expect the Republicans to do well, but I'll probably be camped out here. How about you?
We're ordering a pizza, and hopefully Shanley will put the kids to bed early. And I don't have cable, so I'll need something to stream.
Just DM me. I'll give you one of my logins.
Okay.
I got logins for everything.
Okay, I might do that, and then I want to stream, and I'll watch, and I'm so excited. I'll be up late.
Yeah, yeah, we shall see. It should be. I think I'm cautiously optimistic, but part of me does think the Republicans are going to have a great night, a really great night. Just again, you saw like yesterday or the other day, New York Times came out with a bunch of polls that were just very rosy for the Democrats. Again, I think too much of these polls anymore are used as like a kind of a suppression tactic or things like that. They're trying to give you this false sense of hope. Like if you're a Democrat, like we're going to do it. You just got to come out and we can make it happen. I think they're going to be surprised. I think those types of voters that, again, maybe don't historically vote, but back Trump in 2016 and 2020, that again might be a little difficult to find and to poll in some of these states, are going to come out in a big way. And regular America, middle America is getting hurt right now, and Democrats have to get punished for it. They're in charge. There's nobody else you could point the finger at. They have control of the U.S. House. They have control of the U.S. Senate, albeit 50-50 split, and Kamala getting the tiebreaker, and then obviously they have the presidency. So they have control of Washington, and they need to be held accountable. And so I think if you're an independent voter or Republican, like, listen, I get it. If you don't like maybe some of the rhetoric from Republicans, or you think, you got to move on from things like with 2020, okay, that's fine. But do you give the free pass to the Democrats? Are you okay with giving them the keys to Washington for 2 more years? Can you afford record high gas prices? Can you afford going out to eat when it used to cost maybe $30 to $35? Now you're spending $50 to $55 for a family of four. There comes a time where your money matters, and I'm guessing people's wage increases are keeping up with inflation right now. And like I said, this winter I have great concerns for a lot of people. It's not going to be good.
I agree. I mean, literally, what else do they have to offer you but abortion and transgender surgeries and putting children on puberty blockers because they like the pink? Like what else they got for you, right? Oh, I guess calling you a racist, and sending your money to Ukraine. Okay, well, it's an agenda, I guess.
Last thing before we wrap up the show. Let's assume we already talked about the Senate. Let's assume the Republicans have a great night. If they have a really great night, what race is the race that really would shock you if they won? What's one of these outliers that you think could happen?
I think Colorado and Washington. I actually think Washington before Colorado, though. They win the Senate there.
I'm going to go with a different one because I'm going to go with Lee Zeldin. I think eking it out in New York. And I think his margin, I'm going to go, I can't believe I'm going to say this. I think his margin is going to be tighter than the Tudor Dixon, Gretchen Whitmer case. I think Whitmer ends up winning by 5 or 6. I hate to say that. I hope to God.
Yeah, I do too. I hope to God you're wrong too. But I think
there's just something about that state, and something they have this love affair with her.
Yeah.
I don't understand why, but I feel like Zeldin has the momentum. And if we remember 2021, nobody saw New Jersey being tight. Remember, there were no polls or anything like that. Just had that race even remotely close. And the Democrat ended up winning by 2 or 3 points, but nobody expected that. And that was then, and it's still a very unfavorable environment for the Democrats. And I think that Governor Hochul, whatever her name is, her problem, she's just out of touch. I don't think she's really put forth the effort to campaign and to try to win, to do what it takes to win. And there have been Republicans that have won, obviously Giuliani in New York City. Pataki's won the state as a governor, or was it U.S. Senate? What was he? He was governor, right?
Pataki was
Pataki.
He was governor.
He was governor. So it's not like it hasn't happened before. It's been a long time, and it's still a firmly blue state. But I think enough people in New York are ticked off with the crime situation there, and I think probably enough parents are probably ticked off with how the sitting governor has handled things with COVID and masking, and she just seems out of touch.
And the COVID vaccine for the childhood vaccination schedule is a big deal. Nobody's talking about it. I'm telling you, it's a big deal. there are parents that do not want their kids to be forced to take the COVID vaccine. Call me crazy. They're out there, and they will vote. And you know what? I bet those people. There are probably a lot of Democrats, right? They won't say it because you don't want to be a kook, but those people are out there and they're going to vote. I think that might put Lee Zeldin over the edge. Just putting that out there.
I think he's run a good campaign. I didn't know much about Lee Zeldin, to be honest with you, leading up to the last 2 months. I know he got attacked over the summer at one point at one of his little he had like a little rally taking place. But I watched parts of the debate. He's very polished. He knows what he's doing. He knows how to articulate good points. Yes, he probably comes from a more Trumpian perspective in terms of where you would look at him in the Republican Party. So it's really fascinating that a Republican like that, who would probably fare well in more like a state like Ohio or Florida, is doing so well in New York. You would expect like who's the governor of Maryland? Hogan or Logan? What's his name?
Larry Hogan.
Larry Hogan. You would expect somebody like that to perform well in New York, but Zeldin is not like that at all. He's not like a Charlie Baker in Massachusetts either. He's a true Republican through and through, and I could see him pulling it out. That would be, to me, like the icing on the cake or the cherry on whatever they say.
Base, as the kids say.
Yes. So, and then my last question to you is how quickly, obviously, come Wednesday morning, the 2024 campaign starts. How quickly does Trump announce? And does DeSantis? I still think DeSantis is going to run.
I don't think he will.
I think he will. I think because his margin is going to be massive, I don't see why he wouldn't run. Even if he doesn't want to go head to head against Trump, I get it, but maybe that's the dream team.
I think he's just going to wait. I think he's going to run, but not yet. That's my take.
I want him to run. I'm biased when I say that.
I know you do.
Here's how I view it. If you win a once true toss-up by 15 points and you are so well-liked that you're flying around the country making endorsements, you have no reason not to run. And I get the whole push where people want Trump. I personally don't want Trump to run. I think for sure he's going to run, barring something like with his health. But I think if you're DeSantis, you have all the momentum behind you. You got to give it a shot.
I think Trump runs again. I don't know if he runs again. I don't know. It's tough. But if Trump runs, DeSantis will not. If Trump does not run, DeSantis will. DeSantis needs to take up cigarette smoking because his voice is too high pitched.
He's got some good zingers.
Too nasally. He's too nasally. He's way too nasally.
Too nasally.
Yeah, he needs to smoke. He'll lose weight too. He's a little chubby.
He's a little big. Well, on that note, we thank everybody for tuning in, whether it was live or on the podcast. I didn't get to the chat. There's a lot of activity in there. Appreciate you guys for kind of commenting on your thoughts throughout the evening. We'll be back hopefully in a couple weeks. We'll kind of recap 2022 midterms. Hopefully it's a big night for the Republicans, and we'll kind of look ahead to 2024 and kind of go from there. But appreciate your thoughts, Dane, and hopefully come out more accurate than we did in 2020. I think we're pretty conservative with our thoughts. I feel like maybe the only bullish one we really made was the New Hampshire one. Other than that, I think we're going to be right on.
Do you have a Juul pod? Is that what you're smoking in the video? What is that? Is that a Juul pod? Is that a Juul pod? You're waving something around. Is that a Juul pod?
It's a pen. I don't vape.
Oh, it looks like you look like the type of guy that would vape, Michael.
I've never done anything nicotine related in my life. I have no plan.
I know. I'm just playing with you. Okay. Have a good night, Michael.
We'll see you, everybody. Take care.
Okay. Bye.